Welcome to the next of my video lectures for macroeconomics, and in this one I'm just going to go through and review calculating GDP, physically calculating GDP, and we're going to calculate both real and nominal GDP. And in the course of this I'm also going to review what GDP measures, the important components of it, etc., and why nominal GDP can be a little bit misleading. So from your textbook, GDP is defined as the total market value of all final goods and services produced during a given time period by factors of production located within a country. And I highlighted a couple of sections here that are important. Remember, it's the market value, meaning it is the value based upon the price that it is sold at, which is an important thing to realize. Also, the final goods and services component is important. The reason why it's restricted to final goods and services is because if you include intermediate products, there's an issue of double counting. Now let me give you an example of this to illustrate. For example, if you have a steel company producing steel, if it produces steel, sells it to a car manufacturer, and they use that steel to manufacture an automobile, then you cannot count the intermediate product because it is being included in GDP when that car is sold. So make sure you realize that why the definition includes final goods and services. We want to exclude those intermediate goods and services that are produced and only count the final ones that are being produced in order to avoid this double counting issue. Also, it's during a given period of time. We're measuring GDP, for example, in 2011 or 2012, 2013. For first quarter of 2014, etc. So there's a specific time frame that we're using. And also, it's factors of production located within a country. So its gross domestic product is, it doesn't matter who owns the factors of production. It's just that it's located within the United States. For example, for GDP, if there's a Toyota plant in the United States and it's a foreign-owned company, its production counts towards GDP because it's located within the United States. There's another measure that used to be used called GNP, which was based upon the nationality of the person who owned it. So for example, that Toyota example I gave you, there's a Toyota plant in the United States producing cars. For GDP, their production would count towards GDP for the United States, but it would count for GNP for Japan. So make sure you understand the difference between GDP and GNP. GDP, it's based upon if it's located within a country, irrespective of who actually owns the factor of production. That distinguishes it between GNP, which is gross national product, which is based upon the nationality of the owner of that factor of production. So make sure for GDP that you remember it's the market value, i.e. the price that the item is sold at. That we're only talking about final goods and services. We don't include intermediate products in GDP. We're looking at a specific time period for this measure, and it's for factors of production located within the United States. So if it's located within the United States, regardless of the nationality of the person who physically owns that plant, it counts towards GDP for the United States. Also, an important thing to understand is nominal versus real GDP. All right, let me shut my window because it seems like we have a dog in the neighborhood who seems to think they can disrupt my video lectures. So hold on for a second. Apologies for that. I have a couple of neighbors who have dogs and they seem that they want to be part of my video lectures, which I don't think is appropriate, but let's move forward from that. So make sure you understand the distinction between nominal and real GDP. For nominal GDP, we're going to be calculating based upon current year prices. So remember we said it was the market value. So for example, if we were looking at 2010, we would look at items, the output in 2010 and the prices in 2010 to calculate nominal GDP. Same thing would hold for 2011. We would have the output that was produced in 2011, and we would look at the prices that those commodities sold for or the services sold for in 2011. So when you move from year to year, 2010, 2011, and 2012, the prices change depending upon the year that you're calculating for nominal GDP. For real GDP, the prices do not change. So if we calculate, for example, real GDP in 2010 or 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, etc., the prices that are used are fixed. They don't vary by the year that we're calculating real GDP. And when they say, for example, here they refer to as a base year. When you calculate real GDP, it will be stated, this is real GDP using 2010 as a base year. So what that means is when you calculate real GDP in 2011, you're using output in 2011, what the price is in 2010. Same thing for 2012. You're using the output in 2012, but you're using the prices in 2010. That's why it's referred to the base year, because that's the price level, price information that you're using regardless of the year that you're calculating real GDP. So let me go through a couple of specific examples here. I have a very simple economy here, and this country only produces 6 items: oranges, bicycles, magazines, paper, orange juice, and hats. And we're looking at the information for how much of those items were produced and what they cost in 2009. And we're also taking a look at how much of these items were produced and how much they cost in 2010. So we want to use this information to calculate nominal GDP. And you can see that as we're doing this, we have a price level for 2009 when we calculate nominal GDP in 2009, and we have a different price level which is the price level in 2010. So in calculating this, if you want to know what the final value is, you just take the quantity and multiply by the price. So we want to know how much oranges contributed to nominal GDP. We would just take the 180 oranges that were produced. They sold for 90 cents a piece, and we multiply them together, and that would give us $162. So oranges contributed $162 towards nominal GDP. And we do that same process for every single commodity. We do it for bicycles, magazines, paper, etc. So we just take the quantity of bicycles, multiply by the price of bicycles, and that gives us $1,700. That's the value of bicycles that were produced in 2009. Do the same thing for magazines. That's $175 multiplied by $3.50, which gives us $612.50. Do the same thing for paper. Quantity was $675. Paper sold for 60 cents each. So that gives us $405 as the final value of the good papers that were produced during this time period of 2009. We do the same thing for orange juice, it's $140, and for hats, $700. So if we want to know what nominal GDP for this very simple economy that only produces 6 items, we add up all the final values here, and that gives us that nominal GDP for this particular country in 2009 was $3,719.50. If we want to calculate nominal GDP in 2010, we do the same exact process. We take the quantities of items produced in 2010 and multiplied by the prices in 2010. So we rework that process, and I'm not going to go through that individually. So you just multiply 200 times 1 if you want to know how the dollar value of orange is produced, 25 times 90 for the total value of bicycles, for magazines, etc. So you're just taking Q times P for each of the products being produced. And if we do that, and we work our way all the way through, we see that nominal GDP is $4,475 in 2010. The thing I want you to realize about nominal GDP is it can be a misleading measure of the health of the economy or how well or unwell the economy is functioning. To illustrate this, what I want to do in this next example is that I want to change some of the information for 2010. What I want to do is I don't want to say rig the numbers, but I want to set the numbers up so that the production of oranges is the same in 2009 as it is in 2010. Same amount of bicycles are produced in 2009 and 2010. magazines, etc. So what we have is a stagnant economy, that we're producing the same level of output in 2010 versus 2009, and then take a look and keeping the prices the same as they existed in 2010 and see what type of picture that gives us. So doing that, as you can see, all I did was switch the quantities, or made the quantities the same. So the same amount of oranges are produced in 2010 and 2009, same amount of bicycles in 2010 and 2009, same amount of magazines, same amount of papers, same amount of orange juice, and the same amount of hats. And calculate nominal GDP here, and you can see that nominal GDP still increased. Even though the level of output has remained constant, nominal GDP increased from $3,719.50 to $3,965. So now if you can imagine, if you were an economic policymaker, if you were using nominal GDP to gauge the health of the economy, you would see that nominal GDP increased, and you would look at that and say, well, the economy is growing in a nominal basis. Therefore, there's no need for any type of intervention. We shouldn't be too concerned because the economy is actually growing. Well, that's incorrect. The economy is not growing because output has remained exactly the same. The amount of oranges produced in 2010 is exactly the same as in 2009. Same thing can be said for bicycles, magazines, paper, orange juice, and hats. So given that, nominal GDP can give a skewed image of how well the economy is doing, because the increase in nominal GDP that we're observing here from 2009 to 2010 is due solely to the fact that prices have gone up. All right, for every single commodity, we see an increase on the price level, except for magazines, which stays the same, and for papers, which actually fell. But for every other commodity, we see that the price level has increased. Hats have increased by 20%. I'm sorry, yeah, have increased $2.50. All right, so about 25%, or it is a 25% increase in price. Oranges have increased by 11%. Bicycles have increased by about 7%. All right? So realize that what we're seeing here is not economic growth, but we're seeing an increase in the value of production due solely to the fact that prices have gone up. So if you were a policymaker, you would say, oh, the economy looks like it's doing well, nominal GDP increased, and that's not true. The quantity of output remained the same. The reason why nominal GDP increased in value is because the overall price level increased. So let's move forward to see how we can adjust for this, and that's what the importance of real GDP. We're going to look at real GDP and realize that real GDP is a better measure. It's more, I don't say better, but a more accurate measure of the health of the economy. So if you can see here, I moved back to the original table that I had. So the quantities do vary from 2009 to 2010. The difference is that I am now calculating real GDP, and I'm using 2009 as the base year. So that means regardless of the year that I calculate real GDP, I'm going to use the price level in 2009. So we do the same process. We do the quantity of oranges multiplied by the price of oranges, and that will give us the final value of oranges that were produced. The thing that's important here is that we're using the price level in 2009 when calculating real GDP in 2010, and that what we're doing is keeping the price level constant. So without that change in the price level, we're actually measuring changes in production. How much more is being produced? So we're taking out the impact of inflation on nominal GDP, and real GDP is going to give us more of a measure of, is this economy actually producing more, because we're keeping the price level the same in 2010 versus 2009. And as you can see here, we end up with a much lower measure for real GDP because we stripped out the impact of inflation. But you can see here that we do see a dramatic increase, or we see an increase in real GDP. So the economy is growing. So the economy is producing more. And you can see the quantity of oranges increased. The number of bicycles increased. We did see a fall in the number of magazines, but the paper being produced has increased. Orange juice has increased. Hats has increased. So the economy is actually growing. So that's what I want you to realize. I want you to, one, be able to calculate nominal GDP. I also want you to be able to calculate real GDP, understand why real GDP is a more accurate measure. The fact that it keeps the price level constant, so we have a better gauge of how much output is producing, stripping out any impact that inflation might have. And that inflationary part might give us, we might mislead us into thinking that the economy is doing much better than it actually is.